In recent years, a serious conflict inside the Welk family business has come to light through public reports and storytelling accounts. In November 2022, a private meeting took place within the family company, and it became the starting point of a major internal breakdown. According to the narrative, Larry Welk Jr., who had spent more than 4 decades helping build and support the family business connected to the legacy of Lawrence Welk, was not told about this meeting ahead of time. This detail alone shows how tense and secretive the situation had become inside a family that had long been known for a clean and wholesome public image. What happened inside that meeting changed everything for him and set off a chain of events that would deeply affect the family's relationships and future. The center of this situation was the feeling of trust being broken. Larry Welk Jr. had dedicated a large part of his life to the company, working through years of change, responsibility, and growth. But after the meeting, decisions were made that reportedly removed him from his position. These actions included taking away his salary, his official title, and even his access to benefits like health insurance. For anyone, especially someone who had worked for decades, such changes would be life-altering. It is described as a sudden and complete shift in his role within the organization, and it created a deep personal and professional crisis. This event also created a wider emotional impact beyond just business decisions. Families that work together often face challenges, but when business and legacy are connected to a famous public figure like Lawrence Welk, the pressure becomes even stronger. In this case, the situation was not only about money or jobs. It also involved pride, history, and control over a name that had cultural meaning for many people. The secrecy of the meeting added even more tension because it suggested that important decisions were being made without full family agreement or discussion. As a result, the situation quickly became more serious. What started as an internal family matter turned into a public legal dispute. Larry Welk Jr. later responded by filing a lawsuit, which was reported to involve a large financial claim. This legal action suggested that he believed what happened to him was not just unfair, but possibly intentional and harmful. When family disagreements reach the level of court battles, it often shows that communication has completely broken down. In this case, the dispute became part of a larger story about control, legacy, and family identity. The emotional weight of this situation is also important to understand. The Welk name is strongly connected to a long entertainment history, especially through the success of Lawrence Welk in American television music culture. Because of this, any conflict inside the family connected to that name attracts attention and raises questions. People naturally compare the public image of harmony and tradition with the private reality of disagreement and tension. This contrast makes the story more dramatic and more complex. Overall, this modern conflict inside the Welk family business shows how even long-established family legacies can face serious internal challenges. It reveals that behind public images of success, there can still be private struggles over leadership, recognition, and control. This situation became the beginning of a much larger story that connects present-day conflict with a long and detailed family history. After the internal changes in the Welk family business, the situation did not settle down. Instead, it moved into a more serious phase involving legal action and emotional stress. According to the narrative, Larry Welk Jr. filed a lawsuit that involved a large financial claim. This step showed that the disagreement had gone far beyond internal discussion and had entered the public legal system. A lawsuit of this size is not something that happens suddenly. It usually comes after long periods of frustration, conflict, and failed attempts to reach agreement. In this case, it reflected a deep divide between family members and their understanding of fairness and responsibility. The lawsuit became a symbol of a much larger issue. It was not only about money or job positions, but also about respect and recognition. For someone who had worked for decades in a family-run organization, being removed in a sudden way can feel like a personal rejection of their contribution. That emotional weight often becomes part of legal disputes, even if courts only focus on formal facts and evidence. In this situation, the legal filing added public attention to a private family struggle, making it harder for either side to resolve things quietly. Then came another major and tragic detail in the story. According to the timeline presented in the narrative, Larry Welk Jr. passed away just days after filing the lawsuit. His age at the time was 85. This detail added a powerful emotional layer to the story because it marked the end of his personal involvement in the conflict almost immediately after taking legal action. When someone dies during an ongoing dispute, it often leaves many unanswered questions and unresolved feelings within the family. It also changes the direction of any legal or business matters connected to them. This event created a sense of shock and sadness within the broader story. Instead of a resolution or conclusion, the situation became frozen at a moment of tension. The legal case, the family disagreement, and the emotional strain were suddenly left without the person at the center of it. This kind of ending often leads to reflection rather than resolution. Family members and observers are left to interpret what happened and what it all meant, both legally and emotionally. At the same time, the situation also affected how people viewed the Welk family legacy. Lawrence Welk had built a public image that was strongly associated with warmth, tradition, and wholesome entertainment. For many fans, this image represented a simple and joyful version of American culture. But when stories of internal conflict emerge, they create a contrast between public perception and private reality. This contrast is what makes the story feel so dramatic because it shows that even well-known families are not immune to struggle. In the end, this part of the story highlights how quickly personal, business, and emotional issues can come together in a single family legacy. A disagreement that begins in a boardroom or office can grow into a legal battle and then into a deeply personal tragedy. It leaves behind a complicated history that becomes part of the larger story of the Welk family. To understand the full story behind the Welk family legacy, it is important to go back to the beginning of Lawrence Welk's life. He was born on March 11, 1903, in a small German-speaking community in North Dakota. The place was called Straburg, and it was a simple rural area with few modern comforts. His early life was shaped by the difficult conditions of farming life in the American plains, where survival often depended on hard work, family cooperation, and endurance through harsh weather. Lawrence Welk came from a family of ethnic German immigrants. His parents, Ludwig and Christina Welk, had experienced a long and difficult journey before settling in the United States. Before arriving in America, they had been part of a group of German-Russian families who faced political unrest and displacement. Their journey included leaving Russia in the 1890s and traveling through difficult conditions before eventually reaching North Dakota. This background meant that by the time Lawrence was born, his family already carried a history of struggle and survival. Life on the prairie was not easy. The land was harsh, the weather was extreme, and resources were limited. Families often had to build their own shelters, grow their own food, and rely on very little outside help. The Welk family lived on a farm where every day required physical labor. Children were expected to help from a very young age, and education often took a back seat to survival. Lawrence himself left school early, around the age of 10, because the farm needed his help. This early responsibility shaped his character and work ethic. The family lived in very simple housing conditions. Early on, they used improvised shelters made from wagon parts and sod, which is a type of thick grass-covered soil. These homes were basic, cold, and difficult to live in, especially during winter. Temperatures could drop far below freezing, and the wind across the plains made conditions even more challenging. Inside these homes, life was crowded, and comfort was rare. Despite this, families stayed together and worked through hardship as a unit. Another important part of Lawrence's early life was language and culture. At home, the family spoke German, and much of his early education also took place in German-language religious schools. This meant that English was not a major part of his early childhood. As a result, he grew up somewhat isolated from mainstream American culture during his early years. His world was shaped mainly by his family, his farm, and the small immigrant community around him. This early environment created a strong foundation of discipline and endurance. Although life was difficult, it also built the foundation for his future success. The combination of immigrant struggle, farm labor, and cultural isolation played a major role in shaping the person he would later become. The childhood environment of Lawrence Welk was defined by extremely hard-working conditions on the North Dakota prairie. Life on the farm was not only about growing crops or raising animals, it was about constant survival. The land was unpredictable, and families had to prepare for long winters, storms, and limited resources. The Welk family, like many others in the region, had to create homes using whatever materials were available. One of the most common early structures was the sod house, built from blocks of earth and grass. These homes were not comfortable by modern standards, but they provided basic shelter from the harsh environment. Inside these sod houses, conditions were very simple. Walls were thick but damp, and roofs were often supported by rough wooden beams. There were few windows, meaning that natural light was limited. Heating came from a single stove, which had to be carefully managed to survive the winter. Families often slept close together on simple bedding like straw or blankets. The smell of earth, wood smoke, and animals often filled the air. It was a life that required constant effort just to stay warm and fed. The Welk family worked long hours every day. The father worked in the fields, while the mother managed cooking, cleaning, sewing, and caring for multiple children. Lawrence, being one of several siblings, had responsibilities from a young age. He helped with farm chores such as feeding animals, repairing fences, and carrying water. These tasks were physically demanding and required discipline, especially in extreme weather conditions. Food was simple and based on what the farm could produce. Meals often included potatoes, wheat, cabbage, milk, and eggs from chickens. There was rarely extra food or money for anything beyond basic needs. Clothing was often reused or passed down from older siblings. Nothing was wasted, and everything had value. This environment taught children the importance of hard work and resourcefulness. Despite the difficulty, there was also a strong sense of family unity. Everyone depended on each other to survive. Even though life was physically exhausting, it built strong emotional bonds between family members. Children learned responsibility early, and there was little separation between childhood and adult duties. Lawrence grew up understanding that effort was necessary for survival and that nothing in life came easily. This harsh upbringing became the foundation for his later success. It gave him discipline, patience, and a strong sense of persistence that would later influence his career in music and entertainment. Amid all the hardship of farm life, one unexpected element entered Lawrence Welk's world and changed the direction of his life completely: music. One of his earliest memories was seeing his father bring home an accordion. This instrument was not common in a poor farming household. It was valuable, heavy, and capable of producing rich musical sound. His father played it at local gatherings, barn dances, and community events where immigrant families came together to enjoy music and dance after long days of labor. For young Lawrence, watching his father play the accordion was fascinating. He observed how the hands moved, how the bellows expanded and contracted, and how simple movements created beautiful music. It felt almost magical to him. One day, he was allowed to press a key himself. That small moment had a powerful emotional impact. It was the beginning of his lifelong connection to music. It gave him a feeling of excitement and possibility that was very different from farm work. As he grew older, this interest turned into practice. By his early teenage years, he began playing music at local events such as barn dances and weddings. These performances were often small and informal, and he was not always perfect. In fact, some people thought his early playing was too loud or not refined enough. He even faced rejection from some local musicians. However, these challenges did not stop him. Instead, they encouraged him to improve. Music slowly became more than just a hobby. It became a form of expression and escape from the difficulties of farm life. While farming represented survival and responsibility, music represented creativity and freedom. This contrast made music even more powerful for him. It gave him a reason to continue developing his skills and pursuing a different future. Over time, his confidence grew. He began to understand that music could be more than local entertainment. It could become a career. This idea was unusual for someone from his background, but it planted a seed that would later grow into a major success story. As Lawrence Welk continued developing his musical talent, his career slowly moved beyond small local events. What started as performances in barns and small community gatherings eventually grew into something much larger. His style of music, which was simple, melodic, and easy to enjoy, began to attract wider audiences. Over time, he built a reputation as a bandleader and entertainer who could bring comfort and joy through music. His biggest breakthrough came when his work reached national television audiences. The Lawrence Welk Show became a popular program, especially during the 1950s and 1960s. The show featured music, dancing, and performances that appealed to family audiences across America. It became known for its clean, wholesome entertainment style. Many viewers associated it with tradition, comfort, and a simpler version of American culture. As the show gained popularity, Lawrence Welk became a well-known public figure. His name became connected not only to music, but also to a specific cultural identity. The image of his show was carefully maintained as friendly and family-oriented, which helped it stay popular for many years. At the same time, his earlier life on the prairie remained part of his identity, reminding people of his humble beginnings. Eventually, the place where he was born and raised also became part of his legacy. The old homestead in North Dakota, including the simple sod house and surrounding land, was preserved as a historical site. Visitors could come and see where he had grown up, walking through the small rooms and imagining the difficult conditions of his childhood. This site became a symbol of how far he had come from a life of hardship to national fame. His story is often remembered as a classic example of the American dream, starting from a very poor and difficult background and rising to national success through talent and persistence. However, as later family conflicts suggest,